Hello, and welcome to the lost history of Alexander the Great. I am James Sheaver, the creator of this work of fiction. This fiction is based on the lost history of Alexander the Great. It is not based on the wars and all the stuff that's known about, but the things that occurred that nobody knows about. Otherwise, we would be doing things like the lost history of Wyatt Earp or the lost history of the Commander, which happened before Earth about 1 million years ago, where the Commander was in charge of, he was the head of the High Council of the rebellion against the Fourth Invader Force. But that's a different story entirely. So we focus on just the lost history mainly and the corrections of what people think they know. So today we are going to be addressing the ages between 3 and 5 of Alexander. So at the age of 3 years old, Alexander, he walks better than pretty much any kid his age. He talks better than pretty much any kids his age. So he is kind of like advanced. He's bigger than most kids his age too. So that's where we get our start with Alexander. Alexander's kind of like, he's kind of like already in control when he's very young. So at about 3 and a half, it's one of the woodworkers, they make a bunch of, they make about, I'm going to say 10 or 12 little wooden swords. They look a lot like this. This is probably like a Kopis or a Falcata sword, if I'm pronouncing those right. And it was a lot smaller for a kid. It was probably like that much as opposed to the real sword. The reason that they did that is because Alexander loved to go to the training facility. There was a training facility that was right near the palace in Pella. So, and and Alexander liked going there because he liked watching them spar and fight. He was fascinated by the fighting. He was fascinated by it. He loved it. And they saw that, so they made a mess. The woodworker, he made a mess of swords, about 10 or 12 of them, and they left some at the training facility, and Alexander had one of his own that was specially made just for him. So Alexander was fascinated with sword fighting when he was 3 years old, 3.5 years old. So the positioning of the training facility was right near the capital, or right near the palace of King Philip. The reasoning for this was because the actual training grounds were 3 miles out of town. So they had like a training facility for the elite warriors, the ones that had been in battle, the ones that had survived battle, the ones that were good in battle. They got to train at the elite training facility, and only them in like royalty world really allowed in there. So that was so that if there was an attack on the palace or in the town, they were right there, because there were some barracks and tents right in that area. So Alexander loved going to he loved going over to the training facility and watching the warriors fight. And they saw this, and he had his little sword, and they had a few at the training facility. Even at the palace, they had a couple at the palace too. And the actual elite warriors would actually, they'd spar with him, and they just had a blast, because they would sit there and laugh, and, they would act like he was, he killed them and stuff. Alexander killed them, and they just had a blast with this, because it was like kind of like, getting away from the scene. So it was something else. So, the primary caretakers of Alexander were his mother, Queen Olympias, and his nanny. His nanny often filled in when Queen Olympias wasn't around, or she filled in when during the morning time and so forth, took him for walks and stuff when the mother was not around. or was not able to help because she was a queen and she had queenly duties to attend to. So at the age of about 4 years and 2 months, Alexander and the nanny are walking. So you have this ridge line here. You have this ridge line, it's rocky, or there's trees or something. I think there's a slight ledge of trees and so forth. And then there's like this footpath that comes down this way. And then you have this like wagon path that comes down this way, and it kind of like goes down a hill. So, and you have Alexander here, and you have the nanny behind him. They're actually on the foot trail. And they're walking down the way. They're going out for a morning walk, and they're doing their deal. You know, they're doing their morning walk, maybe going over to Thasians to meet him or something of that nature. I don't exactly know what the intent of this walk was, but it's right just outside of town. So, and what happens here is you have this guy back here, and he... All of a sudden, Alexander and the nanny, they're like, they're just walking along, going this way. And this guy back here, he's like, Alexander, I will kill you. And they're like, and the nanny's like, oh my God. She's like, run, Alexander. So they start running. And this guy's just catching up to them. Now, in the midst of all this commotion, you have down this hill here, you have a couple of guards. The guards are always sent out in twos, at least, and there's always a sword fighter, and there's always an archer that is proficient with swords, so that they can handle anything that comes along. They're always 1-to-1 in the town. That's how they send their guards out. That's how they protect the citizens of Pella and the citizens of Macedon. So, these guys, they come running up the hill, and this guy is catching up on them. And what he does is he comes up behind the nanny, and he's sprinting. This guy's flying, and he just drills her right through the back, and he kills her. She's like, oh, and she just falls. And Alexander's, they're about there. Alexander's still moving. He's looking for a way out of this. Okay? So these guys see this. These guys come up. They see this right as about that is happening, and they sprint into action. They're like, holy flip, So what happens is, they're looking at where this swordsman, he's running at him, and the archer's like going this way because he doesn't want to hit this guy or Alexander. He wants to catch this guy right in the middle. So, and he just kind of like he's catching up on Alexander, and this guy sees the guards coming. He's like, and he starts lifting his sword. And he's getting ready to throw the sword at Alexander. Alexander's looking out behind him, and he sees this happening. He's about ready to bolt and try to avoid getting hit by the sword. So what happens is this guy, the archer, this guy is heading this way. The archer, he's about probably 30, 40, 50 yards away at least. He takes aim with the arrow, and he just shoots. This guy is good with an arrow, obviously. And he catches this guy right through the heart, right before he throws that sword. And this guy just falls to his knees, and he's like, oh, and he knows he's done for. So, and what happens is the swordsman, he's on his knees going like this, and the swordsman just comes up, and he's like, whoop, cuts his freaking head right clean off, okay? So that his head's rolling down the way there. He doesn't hesitate for a second. He runs over to Alexander. He's like, are you okay, young master? And Alexander's like, yes, but why did that man want to kill me? And the swordsman just gives this blank stare. He's like, I don't know. Right then, the archer's running up, and he just looks. The swordsman was kind of like kneeling and talking to Alexander. So he stands up, and he's like, they look at each other, and then the swordsman looks behind him because he's looking back this way at this point. And he says to the archer, what should we do with them? Because he's looking back at the slain nanny and this guy that they have no clue who he is. And the archer's like, we better get to the palace right away. We don't know if there's more of these guys. We'll send somebody to clean this up. And so he had the swordsman has Alexander jump on his back, and they're sprinting. They sprint to the palace. They're just running. They're like, they got to get him there ASAP. So what happens at that point is they're running up, and they're like, there's people coming out because there's people hanging around the entrance and stuff, and they're like, what happened? And the swordsman like, Alexander's been attacked. Someone tried to kill him, and they were like, where was the nanny? Well, the nanny is dead. And they tell them where they're at. They said they send somebody over to get them and get an idea what they're dealing with. So, and right about that point, Queen Olympias comes rolling out, and she's like, what is going on here? And so the swordsman and the archer tell her what happened. And she's like, she goes berserk, basically. She's like, what the hell is this happening in our kingdom for? So, so she demands, so she sends out for an investigation immediately. And so she sends out for immediate investigation into the deal. And these two guys, they're kind of like held up as heroes at this point for saving Alexander. So they are given commendations, and they are actually put in charge of Alexander for a while. Instead of the nanny running him around and stuff, these guys end up in charge of that. So that's part of their reward, because they get to actually, because they want Alexander defended. As far as the investigation goes, they don't ever find out exactly who this guy was. The guy wasn't from the area. They don't know anything about, they did an investigation, they asked around, they tried to figure out who this guy was, they never figured it out. So, and the only, and there was a suspicion, by some people, including Queen Olympias herself, that because Queen Olympias and King Philip fought like cats and dogs all the time, that he may have commissioned this guy somehow to take out Alexander. That was never proven. No evidence was ever found on it. So, but that was the suspicion at the time. So, and these guys, they take care of Alexander from about 4 years and 2 months up until about 5 years. Things kind of change. It's about 4.5 to 5 years. They were anywhere between, 4 months and 10 months, something like that. Because at that time, about 4.5 or 5 years old, Alexander, actually, he starts training. They start training him. I think it was probably around 4.5, 4 3/4, to be honest with you. He's got a sword. They get a group of kids together, and then they start training them, because these are going to be the warriors of the future. And Alexander is happy about this. He's happy to be a part of this. So, and that's pretty much the whole thing with between 3 and 5. Then I know if there's anything more that I come up with, I will, because this is episode 4, It will come up as episode 4A. And I'll make mention of it somewhere. So, also, in the next episode, we are going to be discussing Alexander in the campaign, the war campaign. That is a kind of a lengthy subject, so there may be a number of different episodes on that one. That's what we're going to address in the next one. So hope to see you there.